Very much, gentlemen. Dignitas led by Someday here in the split push game to pick up the first victory of the series. And that's really where the story lies, is in that top lane. Maokai versus the Fiora. Fiora wins out in the late game.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were discussing even during the draft phase how against teams that have capable Fiora players that you feel like the team can play around them carrying, Maokai becomes a deprioritized pick. TSM opted to pick it very early. Immediately you saw the Fiora, and then pretty much, even though there's a lot of stuff that happened in this game, the whole game was whether Someday could become big enough on Fiora to split push and win.
Right, and so we saw early visitation from Chaser to the top lane, able to secure a quick first blood to begin with. This is it right here. Someday TPing back in. This is going to get him off to a nice early lead here. Hans are just kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, right off the bat, this was after TSM had tried to gank Someday because they know the importance of swinging this matchup. Hanser couldn't find a safe way to flash away. I know the casters talked a lot about the different choices he could make. And this was kind of insane because you're thinking, Bjergsen and Hanser, Someday, he's running in the wrong direction. What's he going to do? And he just very cleanly threatens Bjergsen enough. Bjergsen wasn't willing to cast ult because Someday trusted his reaction time. And he just gets to walk away from it.
I mean, I think what's baffling about that as we watch Someday also split pushing down a turret. And so this is what the threat developed into, right? You see all that work put in by Dignitas, he becomes big.
And the way you stop that is you force a 5-man Baron. So in this situation, they could have taken the inhibitor down bottom, but Someday plans to teleport in. Essentially, this is a game-altering fight. If Team Dignitas loses this fight, they essentially just kind of lose the game because TSM had been able to pick up the Baron. But Someday plays this fight really well, and so does Keen, which cannot be underrated because he put about 8,500 damage out in this fight. But look at Someday, he's sitting at full health because of double lifesteal, and the way they decide to continue this, because the advantage had already kind of been had. They'd opened up the inhibitor on the bottom side, they decided to go in. Someday buffered his riposte while Chaser got the knock-up on the squishies, and then Someday flashed in to finish it. Once they killed the damage dealers, he can just kind of comically heal off of Hanser. Because at the time of the fight, I don't think Hanser had Thornmail, and this felt like this split push was going to win after.
Yeah, and although it takes ages to take Hanser down, they do eventually. But this really is kind of the story of the larger team strategies here. It's based on the compositions that they drafted. So you've got the threat of the split push, the 4-1, or even the 1-3-1 if you want to use the Rise for it, against the more fully oriented team fighting team. TSM makes the proper decision in forcing that Baron in order to get the TP out of Someday, or at least say, we'll trade the inhib for a Baron buff. Because they lose the fight, though, on the back end of that, it makes it look like it's a lot worse of a decision out of TSM, but they do play the strategy elements of it correctly there.
They knew what they had to do because they're not going to have a world unless, like we saw over in Korea when Huni built Thornmail third item on a Maokai and had a little bit of lead on the Fiora, you're not going to see a world in which a Maokai can withstand a Fiora in a 1v1 and even in 1v2s as we saw in many situations. So yeah, TSM did what they had to do to try and win, but that's the situation they're in when there's against a very capable and good Fiora player like Someday.
The game ended up going late as we see TSM on your screens here. Definitely, you know, one of their poorer starts to a season than they've had before. It'll be a question for these veterans here on your screen about how do they bounce back. A lot of them maybe haven't been in a situation where, you know, they aren't at the top of the league and expected to roll through opponents. They've got to make some adjustments. But I do want to take a look at our last replay here, 30 minutes into the game. TSM going to come out on top in terms of the fight. Dig picking up a Baron, though.
Yeah, watching this was a slightly earlier fight as well, and it's just the first time they really tried to get an advantage because Fiora had just taken a bottom tier turret. So they decide to force, and they actually get a 5v5. So this is the situation that TSM has to succeed in if they want to win the game. Ash Arrow gets absorbed by X-Special. They kind of pull away and have lowish casualties. But the surprising thing about that is just how the fight just continues. They decide to stay on it, and Team Dignitas doesn't decide to concede the Baron for Baron's sake. They poke as much as they can with Lot. It basically does very little, but then notice how Svenskeren gets tagged by the very patient shot from Wad and is at half health and then takes a Baron shot. So he actually dies during this, which allows Team Dignitas to get the steal. And as Ale was saying during the game, there are very small margins that are deciding these games because it was a split push versus a team fight death ball composition. And if those Baron fights go differently, we see different results in this game.
Yeah, now, something I do want to talk about with that top lane matchup, the Fiora Maokai, and the way that we saw Champion Select roll out, you see there that Jace ban came through in that first rotation, somewhat suspect, at least in my opinion, when you are up against the likes of someone like Someday. In this league, we have top laners who can very clearly play both styles, the tank or the carry. And so to leave something like Fiora up and take Maokai blind into it, allowing the counter, seems like a misstep all the way back in Champ Select for TSM.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like you're picking between 3 poisons and you're like, well, I don't want to fight against that fatal poison, but the other one's going to be okay. So if you're willing to opt into it, it's tricky. Maybe just to play devil's advocate with us a little bit, Jace does unlock different styles of team compositions while still being lane dominant, but there's the Kennen Someday can play into Maokai, there's the Fiora, there's the Jace, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, if you've loaded up Someday's solo queue account anytime recently, you've seen plenty of Kennen games in there. We'll see if it comes out in the next one. Player of the game is going to go to Someday. Once again, just demonstrating his ability to play multiple styles, and I think as he continues to be a threat for this team, I'm waiting to see the first team that can come through and figure him out. Because even though they lost to C9, I wouldn't say that C9 figured out how to beat Someday in the top lane necessarily.
That was a spectacular series, and Someday and Chaser seem to have been able to get pretty good synergy fairly early on. Not to mention, Someday just has total command over these champions. It's not his score line, it's not the damage to champions, it was just the way the game revolved around Someday and how he was able to come out on top.
And let's talk about the way the game ended. I mean, it ended with the TP finish here by Someday. I mean, TSM once again making a stab here in the mid lane, but Dignitas responding in the moment with a very smart call.
We have to see this again, and like they said, if the TP's interrupted, TSM actually wins the game because Team Dignitas is fighting right here. And Chaser can't get it, but watch the interrupt right there by a redemption from X Special. Now, with 2 super minions and a full health Fiora, even if Bjergsen does get back,
it's probably
I feel like it's still over. But just super clutch. Nothing could go wrong there. Even if Someday wasn't there, the minions actually may have been able to end it. So just a nice job by Team Dignitas.
The thing I love about that, though, is because also Freak and Azale were talking about it a bit, and they had mentioned the fact that Reginald said, hey, mixed language teams, they have errors in communication. Well, hey, look.
And then they pulled a split push strategy on you, which is one of the hardest execution complexity compositions there is.
Exactly. So, it really excites me to see a team like Dignitas that had tons of hype around the individuals being picked up on the roster coming in, but then see them also reject some of these criticism thrown at them, like, oh, well, they're not going to be able to communicate, they're not going to be able to operate, in tip-top shape right off the bat. Well, they look good so far. When we come back, we'll see if TSM can tie up the series in Game 2. More LCS action when we return.
Hell yeah, let's fucking go, guys!
That's what I'm
I want to see some clean gameplay!
I don't give a fuck if it's clean. I just want blood.
Monster gonna walk right into an enemy. Sven's got the knockup. All right, Sven can maybe turn around in time. It's gonna be close though. Vital proc. Here comes the Rek'Sai. Couple hits will do it. Someday getting low. He's got the damage though. First blood comes through. That TP flank was sick.
Nice. I'm leaving. Okay, nice.
And here comes the TP a little bit later. That's gonna be Baron picked up by Svensker, and here's the team, but this could be everything that TSM needs. Lod running out of HP, and Svensker takes it out. He's right back out. Bjerg's gonna find a special. Exhaust is on. Looking for a bit more damage. Keen picks up what is a double kill for Someday.
Mouse. Go. Chase. I'm going to chip. No, clear base.
Alright, I'm going base.
And Bjerg's gonna be there to stop it. Oh, the rest go wins the game thanks to Someday in the base. That was perfect. What a play. GG for Team Dignitas.